Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. We are back on my creative server once more, and we are going to be doing something that has been highly requested for quite a while. We are going to be doing some custom tree tutorials. They're actually one of my very favourite things to do, so I'll be excited to show you guys how I do them. I'll show maybe a few designs, maybe 3 or 4, starting with one of the more simpler designs or just a basic design. Hopefully these tutorials should be pretty good. Let's get into it. So the way that I like to do custom trees is I like to start with a base. You want to have a base that's not really too much bigger than about 4 blocks. Obviously you can add a couple more sections kind of coming out, just like this. So having a little bit of roots, you can even make it go down into the ground a little bit. That'll look pretty good as well. So this design that I'll show you will be kind of like a willow tree or leaning tree. It's one of the trees I like. It's kind of like the azalea trees we already have in Minecraft, but obviously more custom and a little bit bigger and a bit more detailed than the ones that we already have. So in order to get this leaning shape, you want to make sure you still go up quite a few blocks. So usually I like to stop at about here, so I think that's about 4 blocks on top of the base, or if you include the base, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish. And make sure you go around with some branches, so either stick it out on that way or this way. Now to get that leaning over effect, you don't want to do this where you have just a single corner touching. You want to make sure that everything is connected properly. So here it looks too unsupported, so you need to make sure you have another block there. And yeah, you want it to lean over just a little bit. I sometimes like to go like this, just to kind of get a basic shape down. I've got a little tester one that I did over there, but you can also just keep it like that. It really depends up to you on how you find easier to make these. So that's basically the basic tree shape that you have now. Now you just have to put a bunch of leaves. I like to first start off with placing them all around the top, just covering all of the oak logs that are here. Don't cover underneath because it looks kind of silly. If you think about trees in real life, they don't have leaves covering the base of them underneath, because that's not really how trees work. Because how trees work is the leaves need to go and reach the sky. That's why they grow on the top or they grow to the sides away from shade. They're trying to reach the sunlight. So having leaves right at the bottom doesn't make a lot of sense when you're looking at trees in real life. So once I cover basically the whole bunch of top here, you also want to maybe go down to about there. You want it to look like the leaves are draping over. Don't go too low because again it'll look a bit silly and a bit like your tree has a bit of a mohawk. So maybe about 2 blocks should be okay, or even 1 block, but I think 2 blocks is probably the safest option. After that, you want to try and extend the tree outwards just a little bit. Have a little bit of a circle go around it, just like this. So obviously this isn't finished, but you want to have a bit of a circle, and then usually when I look at this, I have to texture the top a bit, because right now this looks really flat. Compared to my tester tree over here, this is too flat. We need to extend the top just a little bit. So this is where I like to go in afterwards and just go through and texture some of the top bit. So usually I like to do something like that, where it's just slightly textured enough that it looks more like a dome shape instead of like a flat, thin shape that it was before. Now, when you think of these trees that loom over, you need the leaves to kind of hang over a little bit, which is why I just go random places and I'll just make a whole bunch of these leaves kind of drape over a bit. You don't need loads, but make sure they're not all together because it might look a little bit silly. Then afterwards I like to go back in here and make this a little bit more dense, so it has a little bit more of a tree-like feel, and yeah, it already looks pretty good. This is kind of how I like to do my custom trees. After I make the base of it, or the basic shape, like I've done here, well, I don't like that. I like to do just this, and I go around and I fix some of the things that I don't like as much and add some more things. Like this space here, for example, looks really flat. So I can fix that fairly easily by doing something like that. Or even extending these drapes out a little bit more, just like that. So it already looks a lot nicer than it did before, but because we've extended that side, we need to extend this side just a little bit more as well. So this is how my brain kind of works while I'm doing these custom trees, it's just trial and error. I'm trying to figure out what looks best while I'm building it, and so far this looks the best. Now afterwards, the leaves, when you add it, they make the tree look a lot more different and maybe a little less good. So for example, now it doesn't look attached to the trunk as it did before. So all I have to do is just go back through and fix some of the parts that maybe don't look as good. So adding that I think will look good, yes. And then also this part looks a little bit flat, so that's a simple fix that we can add, just a little bit. But you also want to make sure that your base isn't too wide. So that's why I like to go back through and maybe delete just a little bit of this and add it into the floor instead. So I'll remove some of these because I don't think they fit as well. Oh, maybe that did. Yeah, a lot of it is trial and error as I'm building, but eventually it turns out pretty well. The way you want to do the base for a leaning over tree like this is you want the base to kind of extend outwards in the opposite direction a little bit more, because you need to make sure that the tree has enough support to hold itself on this side, almost like it's pulling on the ground. If you have it more on this side, in reality the tree would probably just topple over, or it wouldn't look like it's leaning over as much as it is. So that's the basic shape of the tree. I'm pretty happy with it. It's very simple. It doesn't take me too long, but there are a few things that you can do to make it look a lot better. So because we use oak wood, the spruce fences fit the best with the colour of this, and they make it look a bit more like there's branches coming off. So I like to just add a few of these around, just to make it look a little bit more textured, more than it did before at least. And although it doesn't do much, it looks kind of cool. So it's a simple detail to add, but it makes a lot of custom trees look a little bit more effort-based, and it's just a simple thing to add. Then the other thing you want to do is texture some of the leaves. So right now, we've just got a base leaf of oak. So one of the leaves that I like to use with oak is jungle, just because it's got a bit more of a chunkier texture, I think is the best way to describe it. And just kind of place it all around. You want to make sure that it's textured enough and also not textured too much, because otherwise it'll look a bit funny. But yeah, just like that. So it looks kind of cool. By adding some simple texture in the leaves and some fences on the trunk, it makes the whole tree a little bit better and a little bit more detailed. It's super simple to do, these trees, so give them a go. They're really nice to add, and all I imagine is just imagine having loads of these into a path or a road going through. It'll look very foresty, and I don't know, it looks very, very cool. But yeah, that's how you build this simple oak tree, which is one of my favourite ones to build. It's just a lot of fun. So now that we've got the basics of how to build a custom tree, or at least how I build a custom tree, let's try some different designs with some different leaves and maybe some different shapes. Let's give it a go. So next up, we're going to do a cherry tree. It's mainly because it's kind of got more of a similar aspect of the tree we just built, with a few differences, but it has the same principles that I've gone through just before. So unlike the leaning tree, we don't want the base to be too thick on one side like that one was. We just need it to go straight up. So again, don't go too much further than a 4x4 base. Obviously add a few things around. And as you move up, make it a little bit skinnier. And you can add some branches and make sure it goes out just a little bit, because otherwise it looks a little bit flat. Now with cherry trees, they mainly have a lot of different canopies that hold up the tree. So there's a few branches that have different canopies on. That's what I've noticed with a lot of cherry trees. So that's what we're going to focus on here. When you're doing a cherry tree, try and make some branches. Maybe we'll make one a little bit lower than that, maybe about there. And yeah, you just want some little spaces around that can give you some canopies. Try and, if you're making a small one like I am here, make it maybe about 2 branches long. I think that's the best option. And yeah, that's basically how you do it. So you want to do a 4x4 kind of base, go up, go a bit skinnier, move the branches out from the trunk. So you want it to stick out this way, for example, or just have it straight. Don't keep it all the same, otherwise it will look a little bit flat and not as natural as it could be. So yeah, just like that, super simple. And then next up we've got the leaves. So I like to try and keep it fairly unison for the cherry trees at least. Very different at least to the oak trees that I do over here, because the cherry trees, they're a bit more even, I guess, when you see them. This being said, don't make it completely even, but maybe just start off a little bit even. Now, similarly to the leaning over tree, you want these canopies to go down just a little bit. Oh, not like that though. So have a little bit going down. You don't want too much again, and this one you want them a bit closer together than the leaning tree was. So kind of like that. I might add one more block here, because I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, so you want it kind of like that, where it goes out a bit, but they're all a little bit closer than here. So these ones had some longer ones. Most of these are the same kind of size. Now you want to do the same thing over on the other space, which again started off as even, which I like to do a circle just like this. And then when I go up, I kind of mess it around a little bit more. Ooh, or just mess it up completely. That'll work too. And then yeah, because this one's up the top, I want to make it a little bit bigger than this one. So I'm going to go around one more time, and I'll make it a little bit prettier in a second, but we'll just get the basic shape down first. So yeah, this one's slightly bigger than the other one, but it still looks a bit too unison. So let's fix that. There we go, that's a little bit better. However, I want this to stick out a bit more on this side, so I'm just going to add one more kind of spot like that, and yeah, that seems pretty good to me. Now let's do the same thing where we make it drape down just a little bit. There we go, just like that. And I've realized this looks good, but I think it could do with one more canopy up the top. So we can add that as well. And this is the same thing. When I'm building custom trees, this is exactly how it goes. It'll be really good, I think, and then I'll be kind of thinking that I could add some more or make it a little bit better. So that's what we'll do here. Now this looks a bit too straight, so I'm going to put it like this just a little bit, so it goes back a bit. There we go. And then maybe add a few branches around this way, like that. And now let's go up, and I think this one will be kind of a small one. So we add this canopy up here, and yeah, I think about that size will, oh, maybe one more actually. Let's do one more circle around. Yep, that looks better. And again, make this a little bit less even up the top. Yep, just like that. And then a few of these kind of going down. Perfect. So yeah, this is our cherry tree that we've got here. I think that I've made this a little bit too small because of how high I've gone. So I'm going to make the base a little bit bigger, because this is what I usually do. So I'll start out with a 4x4 base because that's the best way that you can keep it even. And then afterwards, after you've built the tree, just keep the balance in mind. So if it looks too tall, add the base a little bit bigger. If it's too much to a side, make the base a little bit bigger on one side. That's basically how I do custom trees. And because we don't have any other pink wool or pink leaf blocks that we can use to texture, the next best thing that we can do is, where is it? There we go. Some pink wool, which I do like to add as well. So simply, just like the jungle leaves, put it around. No particular order, just some very simple texturing, just like that. So that's our cherry tree. It's very simple. We can't really add many branches. I guess with the nether brick we might be able to, but I think it might be a bit too, oh no, that should be fine. So you can add some of these nether brick fences to give the branch idea like we did before, which actually isn't too bad. They're a lot better because this one has more of a canopy than the other one does, because cherry trees in real life just have a natural kind of canopy, so they're a lot easier to add the branches. Now obviously these branches aren't entirely necessary, I just think it makes it look a lot more detailed. So if you don't have the resources to do it, it'll still look just as good, or well, not just as good, but it'll still look really good, but it could look better with some fence details. Just like that. So very simple cherry tree design, and yeah, seems pretty cool. Now we've done cherry tree, what's kind of the last one that we need to do? That would be the spruce tree, which you can see a whole bunch behind me. So the spruce tree is very different to the other ones that we've done because it has more of a consistent shape. So that being the signature triangle shape that we see in most spruce trees or Christmas trees, any of those. So the way to do the spruce tree is just a little bit different than how we do the oak and cherry, because these ones have more of an oval design up the top, both of them, even though this one's more triangle-y, but in the end we're trying to make them look as rounded as possible. Whereas spruce trees, we want it to make quite triangular, which makes it a little bit more hard to make them different and more natural, but still possible, so let's give it a go. So to build a spruce tree, we want to do the same thing, about a 4x4 base, and we want to build up. This time we don't branch out at all, so with this one we branched out, with the other one we curved over. This one we want to keep fairly straight. That being said, also make it go out just a little bit more. Ooh, just like that. So make it swirl around just a little bit, because you don't want the shape to be completely linear. Now I've made the base a little bit silly, so I'm going to fix that just a little bit. Alright, so just like that. Now with the spruce trees, I like to, it depends on the spruce tree. I like to start from the top most of the time, but sometimes I'll start from the bottom as well, or I will do both and work the middle up. But we'll start from the top for this one. I like to put 2 at the top, and then usually I go like this. So very similar to the naturally generated spruce trees we've already got. I like to do that at the top, and then from the bottom I'll go down. So the bottom will usually get changed after I do the rest of the tree, because most of the time I've made it too small. So we'll see how we do here. So although we want it fairly linear, we also want to keep as much of a natural element as we can, which means this isn't going to be a perfect circle. I think something like this shape is pretty good for most of it. So after that, we want a little break. So usually I do a 1 block break in between, and then we kind of follow the same shape that we've gotten at the bottom here, but try and go 1 block in. So that looks pretty good. And then same thing, 1 block, and then 1 block in. Now because we've leaned this off to the side a bit, the whole tree is going to be leaning off to the side, so keep that in mind as well as you build it. Again, we've got 1 block here, so we'll make it 1 block around, and I think we made the bottom too small as I expected, so we'll have to fix that. And the same thing over here, just like that. So I think for this, I like to keep the top fairly linear like this, but I think we'll make it 1 lower, because I like to connect this top bit up a bit. So like that. So it looks a bit silly right now, but we'll get there. So I'm going to make this whole bottom bit 1 wider, so that we can make the whole tree a little bit even, or a little bit more even than it is. And that means we'll have to widen out everything here. Okay, so kind of like that. We've got that signature kind of triangle shape. Obviously it's leaning to a side, but as you can see, it looks a bit silly because we don't have much depth or texture. This is where I like to add some in here. I try not to do it as I'm building, because I don't want to obscure the trunk too much. But yep, I'll add it just like that. So I won't go too far, but just a little bit. You can also keep it to go to the edge a little bit more, but not too much. Keep it as under as you can. Okay, so just like that. Now we've added that, looks a lot less silly, which is great. And just as we did with the oak tree before, we're going to use spruce. Oh, actually, I think we'll use dark oak. Dark oak is better. Yes, dark oak is a lot better. We can't add as many as we did with the other ones, so mostly just around the trunk, add some dark oak fences. Again, makes it look a bit more textured and quite nice. Now, again, we don't have as many blocks as we can texture the leaves like we do the other blocks, because any of the other leaves we use are a bit too light, so they look a little bit silly. Instead of that, I like to use some other green blocks that we have, but you have to be very careful, because if you use too many of them, it will look a bit silly and a bit too blocky. So these are the groups of blocks that I like to use. The kelp is a bit hard and it can look really good, but again, you have to figure out that whole blocky texture problem that we have. It's not too bad, like it looks fairly good. but it does have the lines through it. If it didn't have the lines, I think it would look a whole lot better, but because it's got these lines in it, it's a bit hard to do. The green concrete is a bit too light, so I don't like to use it as often. The green terracotta is still not exactly how I like it, but it's still more usable than some of the other ones. The best way to do texturing with these bigger blocks that we have, mostly that aren't see-through, is I like to try and do it in, I guess, chunks, so at least 2 kind of next to each other, so it fits a little bit more. So kind of like that, and again, it doesn't look as good as some of the other trees texturing just because we don't have that many blocks that go with this. Dark prismarine is another block you can use, but it really depends because it is quite blue and it also has that blocky texture, so it's really up to you. Because we can't texture with as many see-through blocks as we can with the other ones, the next best thing that I've noticed is to just put a whole bunch of glass. Now be careful if you're putting it in between leaves like this, it can look a bit silly because it's just floating. So I like to try and put it all in between. And it just makes it look a little bit cooler, like the leaves are coming out. So it's a simple detail to add, but you can add it with any of the trees really. But I like to add it with the spruce trees the most because it does give that element of, I guess, more natural stuff, as we don't have as many block options for the spruce tree as we do with the other trees in terms of texturing. But yeah, that's how I do the spruce trees. You want it to lean over a bit to a side because obviously it's not as natural. One of the cool things you can do with the spruce tree as well is if you're building a whole bunch of these, like a forest or something, keep them all to one side so it looks like the wind has swept through and has kind of forced the trees to stay over to one side. If you kind of have them all over lopsided, it might look a bit strange. It might look cool, don't get me wrong, it might look a bit strange, but if they're all kind of leaning to the same side, obviously not the same tree, but all leaning over to one side, it can look really, really, really cool. But yeah, there you have it. There's all of our tree designs. As a bit of a run through of what we did, we first started with a very simple design, which was this oak tree here that leans over, a bit of a willow tree. Then we went to a cherry design, and we've gone to a spruce design. Both 3 very easy ones. Usually when I do it, I'll time-lapse it, but I figured I'd do a real-time building for you guys because sometimes these trees can be a bit hard to follow along with the time-lapse. But this is how I do custom trees. It's been something that I just learnt on the fly, but I thought it was super simple and I love doing it. I really like making custom trees, so I hope this tutorial helps you. All of these trees are very easy to make in survival as well, because, you know, fences and wood and leaves, all super easy materials together, and I can guarantee you, if you add it to any of your survival bases, it will look 10 times better. So I hope that these trees were easy to follow, and I hope you enjoyed them, and yeah, I'll hopefully see you in the next video. So thank you so much for watching, and goodbye!